Welcome to Brilliant Business Insights. This show solves your greatest business, leadership, and professional development challenges. We realize there isn't one solution to every problem, so we bring you proven strategies, best practices, and expert insights to get you, your business, and your employees where you want to go by removing the BS.
The what?
The BS.
The BS?
Yeah.
Oh,
People don't like dealing with BS.
the
It's BS.
business stress.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Business stress.
Okay. Well, today our topic is 6 keys to accomplishing your professional goals.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Yes, that's a lot.
Yeah. But accomplishing goals, it's not easy for everybody.
It isn't. And I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to share some insight with everyone here and remove the BS from accomplishing goals.
Let me introduce you to my co-host here. This is Jen. Jen is a Thrive coach and a resilience coach with Thrive, a human development company. She guides clients to step out of their suffering and stuckness, be challenge ready, and truly live their beautiful lives while grounding powerfully in the present moment. Jen's background includes 16 years in experiential marketing, consumer experiences, and marketing operations in agency and corporate settings. Her passion is guiding patients with life-threatening chronic illness and their caregivers to fully live the life they're working to heal. Jen believes each day has the potential to be remarkable simply because we wake up to experience life again. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. And I would like to take some time to introduce Lori. Lori is the co-founder and CEO of Thrive, a human development company. She works with small to global size companies, coaching executives and training leaders, teams, and influencers using leading edge skills, strategies, and concepts to make the most impact in their business. So for over 30 years, she's thrived in the financial, business, and consulting industries, primarily working with Fortune 500 companies. And 14 years ago, Lori incorporated coaching into her practice, providing skills that are key in elevating human impact. She's passionate about helping people find a healthier, more exciting way of doing business and life. I'd like to take a moment to introduce John Taylor with Milwaukee Video, having us here at Studio A5 to record Brilliant Business Insights.
That's awesome. Thanks, John.
And then today's guest, Michelle Ann, who is a Harvard trained in neuroscience, will be joining us later in the show.
Cool.
So right off the bat, I want to ask, what is the biggest challenge with goals today?
Accomplishing them. It's interesting because, people spend so much time around goals, months. Companies, some of my clients, they'll spend months developing, the plan for, what do you want your goals to be? How should our performance reviews shake out? I mean, literally it's months long in some organizations. And it all boils down to accomplishing them. What do I need to do to accomplish my goal? Let's focus on that.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this structure of things that you build up to get you there, but more so getting personal with each individual and what works best for you. And so some of what we're going to dive into today are the structures people use. Throw your structures out, people. They're not sustainable. They don't work for everybody. We're at a point in our evolution where one size does not fit all. I don't care if that's on your little tag that says this hat fits everybody the same, or these pants fit everybody the same, or these shoes fit everybody the same. They don't, nor do structured goals. And so part of what we're going to talk about today is really personalizing those, individualizing those, and how you can do it so it's not cumbersome in larger organizations.
And so are there any examples that you have about where the sustainable piece falls away, where looking at accomplishing your goals is not sustainable?
Well, so when you think about it from the standpoint of a typical corporation will go in and say, okay, based on your job description, these should be your goals. This is what you should be accomplishing. And they'll sit down with you and they'll ask you questions around that. And then your response to that is the individualized approach. So you already have your goals. Now you're like, okay, this is what I have to achieve. And then they'll ask me questions about, how it can be done. But to really individualize goals, you have to ask and work with the individual, and great leaders do this. What do you want your goals to be? Let's establish what's important for you, and then we'll align it with corporate. And when you do it from that approach, it works every time.
Well, and so I think that is one of the 6 keys to accomplishing goals, is what you're saying. So if one of them is having an individualized approach, can we talk about like all of the 6 keys? Can we give a quick highlight of
Sure.
the 6 keys?
So let's go over the 6 keys. So first, I'd like to mention that accomplishing your goals is a skill. And so people don't look at it like a skill.
No.
Like anything, it's a skill that can be developed. So actually accomplishing a goal is something that can be learned, and it can be fine-tuned and developed over time. And so we miss that piece. How do I train my people to accomplish goals? So we just jump into, let's achieve a goal. Well, do they have the ability to do that? Are they that type of individual? Are they a get something, get stuff done? You have those
Right.
people that just get in and get stuff done. Or are they one of those people who, like to get tied up in the details? I mean, so all of this stuff you need to know about the individual, and then train them on accomplishing goals. So the six skills to accomplishing a goal are: you have to have an individualized approach. They have to align with your human internal operating system. And I know everybody's going, what's a human internal operating system?
What is that?
And it's essentially what's in your system. And we'll dive into that a little bit more when we get to the second component. The third is trigger your passion stimuli points. And so when I talk about passion stimuli points, there's a lot that stimulates us as an individual. There's a lot that triggers our passion. And so really making sure you're hitting most of those points when you're setting your goal.
That is super interesting, because a lot of times when we hear trigger, everyone goes to, oh, I don't want that. So I'm really excited to hear more about key number 3 when we get to that.
Yeah, triggering your motivation,
Right.
triggering your
But
excitement.
most people think of it in the, fear-based way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, don't trigger me.
You're going
So
to freak me out.
we are
Yeah.
going to figure out how to trigger your passional stimuli points.
Number 4 is own your personal responsibility. 5 is ensure there's effective accountability. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of them that don't know how to do accountability, but a lot of them that have the negative side. You were talking about trigger, the positive and negative side of trigger.
Right.
There's a lot of negative accountability out there. So we're going to talk about how to hold people accountable in a positive, motivational direction.
Cool.
And then the last one, mitigate derailers.
Derailers.
That's the biggest thing for me. If I can mitigate my derailers, I accomplish everything. And so that'll be crucial for a lot of people out there. So before we jump into the details of everything, I really just want to high level this. So when you think about accomplishing goals, I want you to think about it as an intense, passionate focus. So, something captures your attention on TV, and you're just engrossed in it, or wherever. You can be anywhere and something gets your attention and you're focused on it. So it's interesting because my sister's in town, and she and I found this guy on Facebook, Brian Martin. The guy's hilarious. Every time he comes on, I laugh. Like, I can't help but laugh at this guy. So when I pull him up on my phone, he has my undivided attention. Anything else couldn't be going on in the house, and I'm not paying attention to it because this guy's so engaging. Well, so when I'm talking about an intense focus, that's what it is. Everything around you disappears and you're focused in on it. And so when we talk about the 3 strategies, the 3 components of accomplishing a goal, that's what I mean by focus. When you are so focused on your goal, when you're hitting all of those passion stimuli points, nothing else around you, those derailers become insignificant because you're focused. That's where I want to get people to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've experienced that some, where you're engrossed in something and all time falls away.
Right.
So if I'm up in my office and I'm working on something, or I'm reading something, I'm learning something new, and all of a sudden my FaceTime brings me out of that flow or that focus, because my daughter is like, Mom, where are you?
Yeah.
Like, you've been gone for 4 hours. Like, what? It seemed like 20 minutes. So no, I get that. I love that. An intense or passionate focus.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
And so just quick and easy. Think of accomplishing goals as an intense and passionate focus.
So what's going on during that intense focus?
And there are a lot of things going on, and we're not going to get into all of them at this point, but you'll start seeing it as we're talking, or you'll start making the connections as we're addressing some of these 6 components.
So you mentioned that there were 6 components. to accomplishing your goals. And I know we're not going to go into each one of them in depth, but let's get into the first one. So, what is the first component in accomplishing goals? You mentioned it a bit before that they have to be individualized. Is there anything more specific that you'd like to share about that?
Yeah. So when we're talking about individualized, and it kind of goes back to saying what I was saying earlier. Oftentimes we're given what we need to accomplish for that sprint or for the year or for whatever it is. And so I want to urge people away from that because those are the ones that aren't sustainable. That's when people start spinning their wheels, they get bored, they lose interest. That's when the derailers become more important because now you have the excuse to get out of accomplishing the goal. So you're sitting in the office and you make it seem like a bad thing when your boss or your coworker comes in and they're like, "We have to get this done by the end of the day." And you're like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore. I have to go put out this fire." And in the back of your head, you're like, "Oh, thank God I got out of that one." But so some of these derailers, some of these fires actually become our excuses as to why we don't get things done.
Interesting.
And you're excited about it. You want it to be that way because you really don't want to work on that project anymore. And so part of this personalizing your goal is you want the person to be excited about it. You want them to have that passion about it. So when the derailer comes in, they're like, you have to discern everything. Because obviously, if your boss needs something by 2 o'clock, you're going to get your boss something by 2 o'clock.
Right.
But it's a discernment piece. Am I doing this as a distraction because I'm bored with this, or it's not connected to my value, or I don't have interest in it? Or is it really this fire needs to get put out?
Sure.
And so there's so much more in individualizing it. And then the other piece of it, and we're going to move on in this, is what captures one person's attention doesn't capture everybody's attention. And so the example I was using before, so this guy on Facebook, I think he's hilarious. I'll show my husband, and he's like, he'll kind of chuckle. You know how somebody thinks something's really exciting and they show it to you.
And you kind of placate them a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, and inside you're like, well, whatever. You do you.
Right. You do you.
Well, that's the way it is with goals. And so oftentimes when we're giving our employee a goal, it's the same thing. They're like, oh, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And they, well, is this exciting for you? Well, yeah, it is. Well, you're their boss. So they're saying
Of course
that.
they're going to say that.
Yeah, I know I need to accomplish that. I know it's part of my job description. So yeah, that's a good thing. And so it's getting past some of those things.
Gotcha.
Goal setting is not a one size fits all system. 85% of large corporations use a one size fits all system.
Yes.
And I know companies are moving into different software that tries to make it individualized, but the software in itself is a system. So, and one of the examples I like to use is Western medicine. So, Western medicine does everything based on the law of averages. And so, I'm one of those people, I don't take a lot of prescription meds. And so, anything I take, I overreact to it because I don't take anything. Well, Western medicine is the law that the average person, this age, this weight, takes this much. And they tend to overprescribe to those people whose systems are more sensitive to it. Or those people who take meds all the time may need more. So that's why you have a double the dosage. Well, it's the same thing. And so when you talk about the great resignation, when you talk about quiet quitting, it's people are realizing that a one size fits all culture isn't working anymore. It's not working in corporate America. It's not working in Western medicine. It's just not working. Everything, we're different people. Our cells are made up of different things, and our minds are made up of things. We have different stimuli points.
Yes.
And so those are the things I need to capture within my employees, those stimuli points, those things that excite them and motivate them.
So we talked about individualizing goals, and you talked about how employers can take the time to get to know their employees and sort of their stimuli trigger points. And what does the individual need to look at?
So, two of the things that I find are really critical is understanding what you're looking for the goal to get you.
Okay.
And then understanding why you want to achieve the goal. And so, if you can get clear on those two things, those I feel are the most important. And so, it's important because when you lose your focus, you have that centering point to connect to. So, when you have the derailers, and you will have the derailers. You need that centering point to bring you back.
Cool. So, speaking of increasing something exponentially, what is the second component of accomplishing your goals?
The second one is your HIOS.
Oh, okay.
And so this is your human internal operating system. So this is a point where everybody goes, what's that? And I'm going to take you through this really quickly. And I think you'll get what I'm saying. Your human internal operating system is comprised of 6 components. So it's your beliefs, your behaviors, your emotions, your desires, your thoughts, and your inner truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I have this as a key to accomplishing your goals is you can work against yourself. And everybody said it at one point in time. I feel like I'm working against myself. Well, you are.
Running in the hamster wheel or pushing a rock uphill, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's because you're actually doing that. And how you're doing it is your thought is one thing. So, for instance, I want to accomplish this goal. I need to accomplish this goal. My job depends on me accomplishing this goal.
Mm-hmm.
But your belief is, I'm never going to be able to accomplish this goal. It's just not going to happen. And so you're having these conflicting things going on within your system. So your HIOS, comprised of those things, is now in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So the premise behind aligning that is you have to have all of those components working in the same direction. And so you can see it up on screen. We have where we break out your beliefs. So your beliefs are one thing. Your emotions may be another thing. Your emotions, you may be in a state of anxiety now because you're like, oh, I'm never going to get it done. So you're feeling stressed,
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling all these other things. And so that's how you start working against yourself, how you start supporting yourself and building momentum as you start aligning those components within your HIOS. And we'll have another segment at some point where we'll really dive into that.
Sure.
But just have that understanding. And I think, as you look at the chart we have up, it'll make more sense to you.
And what I also hear in that is when you are working against yourself, you're probably actually also extinguishing that trigger passion stimuli point that we'll talk about more as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So in that case, it's more about how do I align my HIOS to set myself up for success?
Mm-hmm.
And if it can't be done, then I would assume you need to modify your goal, right?
Yes. And take it one step further and see if there's something else going on that's creating the derailer.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. And so is there something else going on? Is are my teammates not getting information to me on time? Is the client not getting information to me on time? Did sales promise one thing and engineering promised another? And now I'm kind of stuck in this.
The limbo?
Yeah, I'm stuck in what one person did and what someone else did. And so there are a lot of dynamics that go into it. And so it's just getting clear on what it is for me and how I can best, okay, now that this has happened, how can I move forward? Yeah.
Now, we're talking there about how you can take kind of control of that. But what happens if you feel like the company isn't individualizing your goals? Then how can you work brilliantly within the constraints of that?
So one example I like to use is a client of mine. It's a national organization and they have their Milwaukee division.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're hugely successful. They're one of the highest revenue producing in the organization. And so everybody wants to know what Milwaukee does. What are you guys doing here? What are you guys doing here? How are you accomplishing all
How
this?
can we be more like Milwaukee?
Right.
Which is what everyone should be asking.
Right, yeah. Right. Exactly. And so what I did is I went in there and they said, you know what? We want to know, they called it their core vibe. We want to know our core vibe. Mm. We want to know what we're doing right. So corporate has this vision. They have a mission statement. But we want to have our local one because we're doing something differently than they are because we're so hugely successful. So I'm like, beautiful. So we went in there and we're like, okay, what's your culture? Mm-hmm. What are your values? What's your mission? Let's establish what it is for you. Don't think of corporates right now. And this is what I'm telling you about goal setting. Go to your employee. What is this for you? Get really clear on what it is for you. What excites you? What are some of the keys to your success? Let's get that established So from that, we established their core vision, their core vibe, their mission statement. And then we said, okay, now let's align this to corporates. How does this align with corporates? Lined up beautifully. So what they were doing, they had their own mission statement, their own vibe, their own values. And then that's what they operated from. But yet when they presented in front of corporate, they showed how everything beautifully aligned with corporate. This is how we're satisfying corporate objectives at our level, doing it our way.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you, how many companies out there believe that they're providing an individualized approach? What I normally find is that leaders believe it, but employees don't. I remember in my corporate days, the example of companies providing us a way to be proactive in our individualized goal setting was for us to write a goal in a system in our own words and then manage that goal. That doesn't count. That doesn't count. And most of the time, it doesn't beautifully roll up into the overall goal and mission of the company, nor did it come down to me and align within mine. So for those companies out there who do believe that they're providing an individualized approach, I'm going to ask you kindly, I'm going to invite you to sit back and really discern whether or not that is true.
So what did you do in those situations?
Oh, I just had to do it.
Yeah.
So I just did it. And it was one of those, like, it reminded me of pulling a college all-nighter. Everyone stayed late on the last day before the annual goal review was due. And you just picked your brain to try to, well, at least this is what I did. You picked your brain to see, how did I accomplish this at all? And just willy-nilly kind of put it together.
Yeah.
Because I believe we let the derailers come in and take over the goals rather than putting it more toward an intense focus. Yeah. So,
and checking the boxes.
Exactly.
And this is what we did last year. So follow what you, and I find this too, when people get really overwhelmed, just do what you did last year.
Yeah.
And so all it has to do is pass someone's approval or not. All it has to do is go in a file and we're good.
Right. So that kind of makes me say, what the crap then? Why do we always do it?
Why?
So we're at the point of the show where we're at the what the crap segment.
What the crap?
What the crap?
And so it's interesting, as I was researching, because I research everything that we do here, but so I was looking into some of what other people are saying about goal setting. And so one person's micro, you have to have micro goals. Micro goals, you can accomplish them. And then someone else say, no, you have to start with stretch goals. Because then if you have a stretch, then you're more likely to accomplish it. And there's so many conflicting ideas and concepts around goal setting that it brought me back to, that's why it has to be individualized.
Right. Yes.
Because what works for one doesn't work for the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And, something that's coming up for me is, what if we didn't look at it as micro or stretch, but passion, trigger, passion, stimuli.
And it's interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
And that brings us to the third key to accomplishing your goal, which is they should trigger your passion or stimuli points. But I was hoping you'd say a little bit more about that.
So when I talk about passion stimuli points, there are different levels of excitement in people. There's kind of like what I was telling you with the phone. You look at the phone, you're like, that's funny. And then there are some that are just hilarious, just those gut wrenching. And like you said, then there are those you're so focused, 2 hours passes and you're like, I feel like it's been 15 minutes.
Yes.
And so the more of the stimuli points that you can connect to within an individual, and they're all different for everybody. But for instance, if you like fishing, and I can connect as much as this project of fishing or any learning that goes along with the project of fishing, you're going to retain so much more than if I connect it to golfing and you hate golfing. And so those stimuli points, whatever resonates with the individual, you want to connect with more of those stimuli points within that individual. And so it helps if I'm intimate with the individual. And this is where a lot of leaders fall short. I don't know enough about you to know all those stimuli points. I may know how many kids you have. I may know your spouse's name, but I don't know what drives you. I don't know what makes you come alive.
Mhm.
And so the more I know about what makes you come alive, the better this is going to work.
Right. The other thing that's coming up for me around this is yes, it's on the employer to know more about the individual. And I
Mhm.
think we'll get into this maybe later in the show. But then is it also the individual's responsibility to connect the goal or find their connect within the goal to their trigger point, their passion stimuli? So that personal responsibility piece
Mhm.
of finding your way to getting that. Cool. So is there any way to give people some like push toward finding that passion and engagement
Yeah,
in the goals?
absolutely. And when we're talking about personal responsibility, here again, this is a big topic. This is another one of those where, it entails a lot.
Mhm.
But one acronym that I ran across that I really appreciate is from Joe Polish. He's from Genius Network and I Love Marketing. And he uses ELF for entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And so I'm using it a little bit differently. I'm using his ELF acronym, which is easy, lucrative, and fun, but I'm using it for goal setting. And so when it comes to goal setting, you want them to be easy.
Mhm.
And so even if they're big, so if big goals work for you best, great, but just make them that at least the first step has to be easy because you
Okay.
got to start the momentum going.
Mhm.
And so regardless, it has to be an easy start. And then the next one is lucrative. And so when I talk about lucrative, it has to be rewarding. It has to include motivators relevant for the individual, intrinsic and extrinsic,
Mhm.
depending on what the individual prefers.
Sure.
It has to be supportive feedback, like I said earlier, not judge or critic.
Mm.
And so it's supportive feedback that moves them forward. And include personal and professional development because I
Mhm.
want my employees to develop as much as they do. And what is that for them? And then the next one is fun. Like I have this note up on my fridge. It says, I don't have time for anything that's not fun. And if you think about it, 98% of people want to do something fun.
Mhm.
If I'm like, here, go count widgets for an hour, or here's something really exciting, and it's rock star stuff, you're gonna be like, I want to go do that. You're
Right.
not, you know what I'm saying? And so regardless, I don't care what you're doing, everything can have a fun aspect to it.
Yes.
And so
Even
what
counting widgets, just find the right widget
right.
to count to.
Or you can start flicking them at people, or
Flick,
you know what
flick the
what
widgets.
right
Yeah.
one have your little goal set up and whatever it is. But yes, so that's ELF. Easy, lucrative, and fun.
Cool. So let's do a quick recap. Goals need to be individualized,
Mm-hmm.
align within our HIOS, our human internal operating system, and trigger passion and engagement, or the ELF.
Yes.
Cool.
And I combine passion and engagement because to me they're synonymous. If you're
Mhm.
passionate about something, you're going to be engaged.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
We would like to welcome our first guest today. Her name is Michelle Ann. Having studied under both Harvard professors and Indian gurus, Michelle Ann is one of the world's leading experts in maximizing human potential. She has over 30 years of experience integrating Western science, Eastern philosophy, and business transformation models into a powerful and proven package.
Michelle is widely known as the brain trainer that helps people to rewire their brains, as a result, reducing anxiety, improving relationships, cultivating executive presence, and more. Her work is a culmination of over 2 decades of leading edge research and real world experience. Studies and testimonials prove the techniques and tools work.
Today, Michelle works as a diplomat for American Institutes of Stress, Forbes coach, virtual first responder for Harvard Medical Training School, and is one of just over 1,000 ICF master certified coaches. This puts Michelle and her results in the top 2% of her field. Welcome, Michelle. We can't wait to talk to you today. So first, would like to start with what allows a goal to be accomplished, because let's face it, like we said earlier, you create goals to accomplish them. You don't create goals just to create goals. And so would like to tap into your expert advice and find out what it is that allows people to accomplish their most pressing goals.
Well, let's first define like what a goal is from a neurological standpoint. So we think of goals in one way, but neuroscience actually would say a goal is a detour from the path of least resistance, or better known as a habit. So it's a detour from what we normally do, like that automatic behavior that we have. And really, if you think about it, it's an imagined end state. So I want to define and first lay down what it is. It's an imagined end state, or really like a desirable outcome that wouldn't otherwise have happened unless we took an intervention, unless we did something. So when we're putting that together, we're trying to imagine something, and we have habits that are not in alignment with that. So alignment with that. And so to really understand this, when we want to know how to accomplish a goal, we need to combine both psychology and neuroscience. And I'll explain why. Like achieving goals takes both like a will and a way. So there's psychology and there's neuroscience. And first I'll explain, I'll break this down. It's hard to achieve a goal because we need both of these to be at play. And if I break it down to both psychological or neuroscience perspective, we have to establish the way, and that is the neuroscience part. That's the executive functioning, the brain power, the skill, the knowledge, the ability to do it. So our brain has to know that we can do it. As a coach, you actually have to understand when we ask people questions, a lot of times to try to unearth or reveal, have we done something like this in the past, or what are your strengths and how are we going to apply those to this? In a way, that's actually showing them what their skills are, what their knowledge is, and that they have an ability to do this. And we break that down. That's executive functioning. That's all happening in the prefrontal cortex right here. That's the way. So you need some skills, some power, some knowledge in order to be able to do this. It's that cognitive capacity. That's the first part. The psychology about it is there's a way, the will. The will is like the motivational factors that propel your behavior. Okay, so we all need to be motivated in order to do something. So the motivation is all the mental part. The mind makes this up, and it can be influenced by both incentives inside a person or outside. Okay, but we both, in order to accomplish a goal, we both need to have the neuroscience, like the skills and the motivation to do it. And overall, a perceived behavior change, when you think about this, your brain is going to perceive how hard it is to do something. And if we don't have the skills, okay, remember, this is the way. If we don't have the skills, it feels harder. Like if I don't know Thailand, if I don't know Thai, I can't read signs in Thailand when I'm driving my motorcycle or my car. It takes a lot more to do that. If I do have the skills to drive a car in the United States, it's easy to drop my daughter off at school an hour earlier. So there is a skill, there's something there. So now what we want to make sure we understand is this perceived behavior change. Here's the trick to it all. The more we perceive the behavior to be hard to change, the more motivation it takes. Okay. And we need the level of skill that we need to get needs to equal and not exceed the level of motivation. A lot of times we really want something, but we're not as motivated to do it. So sometimes you need a lot of motivation and you need a lot of skill. You can break it down into little pieces so that the brain can get behind it, but you need it to be equal. When it isn't equal, a lot of times you won't achieve your goal. If the motivation and the skill level are not equal, they can't exceed each other. So neuroscience will never really change the fact that goals are hard to achieve. It will just explain why they're hard to achieve, if that makes sense.
It's interesting because earlier, I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about is you have to make them, there's a lot of controversy around whether the motivation comes after setting the goal or whether once you start achieving it, the motivation comes. And so I like that you bring that up, the motivational piece of it, and it can't be overwhelming. And so there are all these factors that have to come into play to really accomplish the goal that we don't always think about. We don't always think of really breaking apart what a goal is and how to actually achieve it from the neurological and psychological standpoint. So I love that you're bringing that aspect of it in.
Yeah, that's good. And what a lot of times we really want to get a goal done, but we don't break it down into little pieces that we feel that we can achieve. Because remember, there's the will and the way, and you need both of those, right? The will is the motivation. The way is the actual skills, the knowledge, the brain power in order to do that. And it's all a lot about perception as well. If I think I can't do it, then I'm not going to be able to do it. It doesn't matter how motivated, because I don't have the skill. And there is a balance to these two things. You can put it on a graph. One can't be higher than the other one. So it's got to be an equal distribution, or we won't be able to do it.
And I would expect then also that the will might wane as you're working through the way at times.
Yeah.
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 I have a lot of suggestions for that. So the brain needs, I know a lot of times we think that we can just push through something and that like sheer force will get something done. And then if we keep being disciplined but science shows that to be false. Typically that doesn't work. Sometimes it might work, but the majority of the time that does not work, where we need different, there's the dopamine effect. So we need different, motivations, we need different rewards in order to keep going. And so when we set different rewards, whether you're trying to lose weight, like I work with a client who lost 8 pounds, she wants to lose 5 more pounds, and she needs to have something she wants because now she's kind of getting tired of it. And so she's getting tired of it. She's already lost 8. She's only got 5 more, but she's kind of happy where she is. But so now she wants to put some kind of a reward to get there. And if she puts that reward to get there, then she's going to go to the next step. So you do lose the motivation as you're kind of achieving it. So that is true because now you have the skill to do it, but you're kind of less motivated.
Yeah, you need those. It's like you need those celebrations and those milestones and those intrinsic and extrinsic motivators to continuously happen for that sustainability piece of it.
And you know what I find also? I find with myself, I may have a goal to achieve something, and it took me a long time, and I'm really set to do this. Like I wanted to learn to meditate, and I meditated, and I turned my life around, and I changed all these things in my life, right? But then I met somebody new, and they asked me, "Hey, so what's your story?" And you know what I did? I told them all about my life 2 years ago. And I had to stop and think, no, I literally went up to that person later. I said, yeah, no, that was my story 2 years ago. Let me tell you about my life now.
I like that.
Yeah, and what happens there is that if we don't have those milestones and those rewards, and when I coach people, I really try to focus, I try to shine a flashlight on what people did, my coachees, the people that I'm coaching, especially leaders, what they did and highlight that and celebrate that in a small way for them to have the aha moment. Because when they have the aha moment, it sinks in. It almost goes cellular to them that they know they've gotten there and they can go to the next goal, because otherwise you don't know that you made it. Your brain is just going to keep trying to do something because it doesn't know that you made it, right?
Yeah.
It really honestly doesn't know that, right? The brain only knows what you tell it.
Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as part of what we teach our clients and what we teach in coaching is that piece of acknowledging where they're at, where they're come, what they've accomplished. And like you said, it's really important to keep that at the forefront and just keep reminding them, look, I can't tell you how many clients I have. And I'm like, I always do this little segment generally like after a year. Do you remember last year when this, and this happened? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. It's like, you have to say it so their brain hears it. And then they're like, wow, I've come so far. And you're like, yes, you have. And so it's just that repeat of how far you've come and where you're at and what you've accomplished that helps a lot of people.
And when you have physical things, like you buy yourself a necklace or you go buy some new workout clothes, then you know you've achieved it, because every time you wear those clothes, you're going, I achieved that. So there's a physical recognition. There's a material thing that's actually, set there. And so the brain doesn't know. It doesn't know what's true and what isn't true. It only believes what you tell it.
Mm-hmm.
And so watching a movie is a perfect example. You watch a scary movie. It was just October. And when you watch a scary movie, your brain will believe that's happening to you until you tell it, this is a movie. I'm laying in bed. I'm fine. You know what I mean? And so, right. And so the mind interprets what we see and puts a narrative on it, and it brings all this meaning to it when there's not a lot of meaning there in the beginning, but we're adding that meaning on it. And that's actually what makes things harder to achieve and easier to achieve. If we would take a lot of that meaning off, a lot of things would get a lot easier to achieve.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's something that we discussed. Absolutely. There are these ancillary things that we attach to things, and we shouldn't attach them to them. So when we have this trigger, often the trigger is because of all the external things and all these past experiences that we attach to it. And so it's important to talk about how you're showing up. It's important to talk about your narrative. And at some point, we'll do a show on that, your narrative, your story, what you're showing up in. And it just brings all of that in and convolutes, in this instance, your goals and reaching your goals and, obtaining those desires.
It does. Science shows that about 45% of our daily life is habits, right? And these are
Yeah.
learned like reflex like behaviors, and they're triggered from that unconscious story that we have. It's that
Yeah.
familiar, it's that set of sequences, the time of day, the context of something. All of those habits are formed from that. And that it was derived by that meaning that you're talking about. So those habits can be changed. Like a goal is just trying to kind of undo a habit, really, that automatic behavior, right? And they're all set up. We're setting ourselves up to be, quote, safe or protected or towards pleasure and away from pain, things like that. But they're all predicted. They're all in our brain. Our brain is like a computer, and it keeps track of all those things in the hippocampus, the long-term memory. And whenever we see a new situation, it compares it and it sees the differences. And so right there, that's where
I'm
you're
sorry.
going to go ahead.
That's why the brain is looking to conserve energy, because it does
Correct.
use one of the most, it is the organ that uses the most energy in our body. And so when it can find those habitual things to latch onto, it doesn't have to then
Like, oof, I don't have to think about that.
I just got so excited, Michelle. You were talking about that. Like, yes, I know this part.
Yeah, the brain is, if you're thinking of a car, it's like a V8. It is a gas guzzler. Okay. And so and so when you're setting a goal, like you had asked like when you talk about how to create new behaviors, or like when there's a new behavior, how do you do that? How do you get through some of these things? Is all of those habits are going to take over. You're really thinking about, if you think about it, you have to override a habit. Now, when you're talking about being the brain being a gas guzzler, you have to make that goal. You have to make those behaviors energy efficient. That's the goal. I mean, that's really the goal in the brain, neuroscience wise, is to make those new behaviors energy efficient. If there's friction, if there's any kind of decision that you need to make, it takes cognitive resources. So your brain's always going to conserve. So it makes it very difficult, right?
And that's part of what we're talking about, because what these corporations are doing is they have standardized goals. So they come in and this is the way we create goals every year after year. So this individual goes through the same process. So when they sit down to do the goal setting, they do exactly that. They go into the habit portion of their mind, the habitual portion. Okay, this is how we establish goals. These are the goals I always have. And there's nothing getting them out of that rut. There's nothing saying, no, let's be innovative. Let's be creative. How are you going to accomplish them differently because you didn't last time, or because you didn't meet your objectives? And so what companies are missing is when they go in with this pattern structured set of how we do things, the response to that is the pattern structured response. So they always tout innovation, creativity, but they set it up and the structure is habitual, mundane, what we've always done.
And we tend to overestimate the influence of like a goal. Especially at work, if that's not our goal, then we're not motivated to do it. Okay. Unless we are aligned with the vision and the mission of the company. And how aligned are most people with the vision and the mission of the company? It really is going to be affected a lot by the psychological safety, the interactions of the boss, how much they care. There's so many factors. So we tend to at work really overestimate the influence of having some goal, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because that's everything we were talking about up to this point, is just really digging into that and finding out what that is, and really figuring out what can be done differently. So what strategies do you suggest to move past that, to move past those mental barriers?
Well, what normally people are having is there's a friction associated with this new behavior. If I have to do something, it's taking a lot more effort. Okay. It's going to be more complex decision making. It's going to take a lot more energy, right? In order to do this, to change my behavior. This is what people are thinking. So your brain is automatically going to just reject things. If it's going to take conscious effort, you're going to reject it. You'd rather put that effort into something when you get home from work and like making a new recipe. Or, you see what I'm saying? You'd rather conserve that for something else, going to a yoga class, going to pickleball, whatever so if it's not energy efficient, you got to remember people are going to reject it. If there's any friction, decision making, it's going to be hard to do, because
Right.
what's happening in the brain is when we access that memory, it takes all that gas. Okay. And we have, the brain has to, here's what the brain's doing. It's breaking it down into little chunks. Okay. It's called action chunking, and the environment affects it. So the context in the environment is going to affect how you're feeling about that. Is there psychological safety? What's happening going on here? What's my motivation? Right. What's the context? And then are there any competing beliefs? If I do this, what's going to happen to me? You know what I mean? You never know what we learned when we were young is going to come into play. And so in order to create real structural changes, it takes repeated behavior, right? For a long period of time. And it takes a minimum of 4 months to make new behaviors. So here's some strategies. Now you can glean, there's a couple people that everybody looked to in the pandemic. Nobody really wanted to wear masks and wash their hands. This was something everybody was like, yeah, no. But what did they do? So let's look to this example. And I'm going to use this. I'm going to rely on this because everybody experienced it. Everybody had to go through all this. And whether you wanted to do it or not, you did it. Okay. And what did they do? They set up the environment for success. That's why I'm relating it to the pandemic. So you can easily retrieve these. Wherever you went, Target, where you went to Nordstrom, wherever you went, they always set up, there were masks and there was hand sanitizing stuff. So just like that, the first thing you need to do is you need to remember to set your environment up for success. So you have to take time to do this, whatever the action is. Like if you're going to work out, I mean, at home, have your workout stuff ready in the morning, have it set there, right? Whatever you're going to do, make your environment ready for success. The next thing I would do is create some action sequencing like that gets it easy for you to do so that you can make this more automatic. Remember, we don't want this to take a lot of gas. So every morning, to brush your teeth. You maybe brush your teeth before you go to bed. You wake up, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, add something else on there. I'm going to call that piggybacking. You can leverage this. If I do this, then I do that. So you want, and one thing I do, I don't like to gather my receipts up and get all that stuff done. And I don't like to put my receipts in spreadsheets and all that. I don't like to do all that stuff. Okay. I'm more of a creative mind. But whenever I turn my computer on, if I turn my computer on today, I run around the house and I get all my receipts from wherever they are and I put them in a thing. Then on Friday, if I turn my computer on Friday, I go through and I take 15 minutes and I put them in the spreadsheet. And there's only like maybe 10 receipts. So it's easy. But I piggyback things. If I do this, then I do that. If I work out and I ride the exercise bike, I read a book. Now, when I'm at the gym, if I look at the exercise bike and I don't have a book, I don't do the exercise bike because they go together for me because I've piggybacked those things. So I leverage that. Another thing I would actually tell you to do is add or remove friction. It can be either or. So I remember in Denver when they didn't want people to smoke. Okay. They're trying to get people not to smoke, right? So they made smoking inside buildings, office buildings. You couldn't do that. You'd had to go outside to smoke. Well, I remember going outside with my attorney one time and it was bitter cold and snowing and he has to smoke. He goes, come out and talk with me while I have a smoke. I'm like, wow, this is some friction. If you ask me, I don't want to stand in the cold for 15 minutes just to smoke. So that's adding friction. You can also remove friction. Okay. So you can add or remove friction, removing friction. There's different ways that you can do that. So that's another one. Another thing is you can create a ritualized or like unique cue. So every time I go out to eat, a lot of people, when they go out to eat, I don't work a lot with people with losing weight, but it's an easy one because that's a goal a lot of people have.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when people go out to eat, it's hard to pick healthy things. But if every time they go out to eat, they want to find 3 healthy things first on the menu and pick from one of those, that's what I'm talking about. Every time you do one thing, you're going to do it this. Every time I, have a snack, I'm going to go for a carrot or something healthy, not M&Ms. So create some kind of ritualized or unique cue for yourself. Okay. And there's a couple more. You want to target, like in coaching, we talk about this a lot, target very small, doable actions, very small, doable actions, because that's going to help create huge behavior change and make large improvements in the long run. Small, doable actions. Remember, you got to have the motivation to do that. Like the task can't be that perceived that hard because it will take too much motivation and we just don't have that brain power every day.
I always like to ask someone, what would make this easier? What is one thing that would make this task easier. And then it allows them to break down some of those barriers, some of that friction from wanting to move forward and actually sink into it and then move forward from there.
Yeah, I always say head east.
Uh,
And when I say head east, it's an easy action step. What's one easy action step that you're really going to do? And it has to excite you, because if I look at you and you say, well, I'm going to start going to the health club once a week, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But if when you're telling me your easy action step and you're excited about it, oh, I can do this, then I'm like, okay, that's going to happen. And so I
You,
always watch for those cues.
yeah.
you really do need to find the motivation behind it. And I ask when I'm coaching people why they want that. Then I ask why again. And then I ask why again. I mean, I really want to know why. And the first why is usually very basic. Like there's not a lot grounded. They're not grounded in that. The next why is a little bit deeper. They're not sure how honest they want to be. And then the next why is usually something to do with their parent relationship or something like, well, my parents did this and I really want it because of this. Now I got something, because that's beneficial to them. That's motivation in their belly, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so that motivation doesn't go away. That's the strongest. The neurons in our belly, we have neurons in our belly and in our heart and in our head. The ones in we've heard this, the triunal brain.
Right.
The ones in our belly, the ones like more survival oriented. And those are the ones we don't let go of, because the brain thinks if we don't do this, we're going to die. I mean, it almost puts that psychology on it when we really know we're not going to die. But the brain has got this like focus that this is a survival thing and this comes before all else. So if you can find that survival, not necessarily survival, but that like it has to be in your gut, that motivation has to be in your gut.
We want to thank you for joining us today, Michelle. We will have your website and your information attached to this segment. We will also have it on our website, and we appreciate you taking the time today. And if you would like to just go ahead and quickly say your website and where you can be reached, that would be fabulous.
Sure. People call me the brain trainer because I kind of take the guesswork out of like business and life, so that things don't tax you as much. So people call me the brain trainer, and my website is my name, Michelle Ann, MICHELLEANNE.com. And you can reach me there. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at the Michelle Ann. So you can reach me there, and you can DM me any kind of brain hacks. I throw out brain hacks almost every day to help people with any kind of challenges that they're going through. That's my purpose, is really to help people overcome challenges with ease.
Cool.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much, Michelle. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Lori, we talked a little bit earlier in the show about personal responsibility, and it is a big topic. But what does it mean in relation to goals?
So when we talk about personal responsibility, I think of ensuring that you have everything you need to be successful. And so oftentimes, and we mentioned this earlier, we rely on the leader. Like the leader should be doing this. The leader should be doing this. But there's some onus on the employee too. There's some onus on them in the sense that if you don't have what you need to be courageous enough to get what you need.
Yes.
And so it's having those conversations. It's setting yourself up for success. And so it's owning that piece of it.
Cool. I totally resonate with that. A lot of times people are afraid to step forward and say, I need more support here. They're just going to burn themselves out trying to reach a goal.
Yeah. Because, I mean, ultimately, it's your goal.
Yes.
You're responsible for it. So what do you need to accomplish it? If it's less fires, because oftentimes people are like, oh, I get distracted because this person needs that and that person needs that. Well, then it's your personal responsibility to make sure that you're not distracted by those fires. You need to be
boundary,
absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
And so have those conversations.
Okay.
Like, I'm trying to accomplish a goal here. Can this be done later? Can, a different timeline be set up? And so start having those conversations instead of, because oftentimes our bosses do this too. I need this by 2. Well, that's just when they want it. They don't really need it by 2. If you have the conversation, well, I just need it by Friday, and it's Monday. Well, you need to ask those questions so you know that information.
Gaining clarity.
Yes.
Awesome. So a lot of times I think people may think that personal responsibility and accountability are the same thing. Now, they may be synonymous, but when we talk about the fifth component is accountability. And so how do you describe accountability as it relates to goals?
And I love this one because there's so many misconceptions behind accountability, and there's so many wrong ways to do it. And yet it's not that difficult. And so when I think of accountability and when we talk about accountability here, it has to be the type of accountability that drives you. I want it to be honoring of everybody. I want it to be something that's going to move you forward, not hold you back. If I'm using accountability in a way that holds you back or makes you look like the bad guy, there's one company I work with, great company, but their accountability is a lot of finger pointing. Well, I can't get this done because he did this or they did.
Yes.
And it's like, I thought, you know what? If we take your personal responsibility, set your boundaries,
remove the BS,
accountability isn't that difficult. Yet it holds so many companies back. If you go into a lot of companies and you ask them their biggest challenge, accountability. It's become this bucket, kind of like one of the things we talk about at Strive is a stress bucket. You just throw it in the bucket. I'm just stressed.
What does that mean? What does stress mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it means that I'm frustrated or I'm overwhelmed or I'm sad or okay, well, let's look at all of those stress danglers and figure out how to address each one of those. So I'm hearing you say the same as with accountability. Okay, well, what are the individual accountability danglers that we can take a look at and improve upon?
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's the Band-Aid. Yeah, we just don't know how to do accountability. We're not accountable. We're not accountable here. Yeah.
We're going to rip off the Band-Aid here.
Yeah.
How can a leader or an accountable person or accountability person help make an impact in people attaining their goals?
And so one of the things I love the fact that you can have that support or that accountability person. I think it's imperative, especially for a lot of people. And so when you have that accountability person, and it's letting them know what holding you accountable looks like for you. And so again, it's that exchange of how do we do this to set the individual trying to accomplish the goal up for success? What does it look like for me to hold you accountable so I don't derail you or so you don't start feeling bad about yourself?
Right. So as it doesn't come across as a judgment or criticism of the work you're doing. Yes.
Right.
I can resonate with that very, very deeply in my past life, my past corporate life, because I would take everything so personally. If people were coming to me and saying, how are you doing on that? How are you doing? Every time they'd point something out and I'd be like, oh, I haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah.
It would just knock me down.
Yeah. So where they thought they were being helpful and holding you accountable, it was actually stressing you out and making you feel like you weren't accomplishing anything.
Right. I wasn't enough. I wasn't doing enough. And so it would have really been valuable for me to be able to sit back and discern, okay, how can that accountability person, how can that leader truly support me in this?
Right.
Interesting.
And that's great information.
Right.
I mean, as a leader, I want to know that. If I'm going in and I feel I'm supporting you and every time I'm derailing you, that's huge information. You know what I'm saying?
That's very big. So this also then brings us to the last component. What is the sixth key to accomplishing goals?
It's mitigating, like I said earlier, my biggest one is mitigating the derailers. This is mandatory for success. Everybody wants your attention. Everybody wants your time. Everybody wants your resources. This is prevalent in corporate America. Like you're scattered, especially with leaders. I'm scattered in 20 different directions at any moment in time. And so it's so critical that we can start, so many people say, well, set a certain time of the day, and leave your office door closed or, and then that way everybody knows from 9 to 12, you're working on this. Great. If that's what works for you, do that. But in addition to that, it's those fires that are coming up. It's those people that are running in your office. It's how do I deal with that when I have to? Because if I have an employee that runs in my office and they have a challenge, oftentimes I need to help them through that, because then it's slowing down their day. So now I'm impacting a lot of people's day if I'm not addressing some of those things that time. And so we use the word mitigate here because I know I can't just shut my door all the time, but I can start designating those certain times. I can start establishing those that take my focus off at the most. And so I can start having an understanding. So the key to it is understanding what derails me. And then it's having a strategy in place for when it happens, because it's gonna happen.
Right, it is. And I think a lot of times when it happens, people feel like a deer in the headlights. So do you have an example or some recommendations on strategies to help mitigate distractions?
Yeah.
And then what to do if a distraction comes?
Well, I call it Dr. Mister.
Dr. Mister.
Dr. Mister. And so the reason it's Dr. Mister is you have the disruption.
Yes.
You're always going to have a disruption. Then you recombobulate. So think of it at the airport.
Yes,
You have
I
the
love
recombobulation station. That's to get all your crap back together so that you can go catch your plane. Well, in your office, that's what it is. You have the disruption. Okay, I have the disruption. Recombobulate, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, I have to get back on track, or I got to finish this and then get back on track. So whatever recombobulating looks like for you, do that.
Okay, mine would be like deep breaths for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
all right.
yoga,
Yoga,
whatever
you
it
do.
is for you.
Take a swig of water.
Yep.
Okay, so recombobulate, and then what's next?
Move forward. What do I need to move forward
So ask yourself, what do I need to move forward?
to get back on track? So it becomes back on track. And then it's repeat, because it's going to happen again.
Wash, rinse, repeat.
Wash, rinse, repeat.
Wash, rinse, and repeat. Your Dr. Minister.
Right.
That's awesome. I love all of the acronyms coming up today. So to summarize the 6th key, mitigating distractions starts with becoming aware of what they are for you and establishing strategies to quickly move through them to get back on track.
Yes.
Dr. Mister.
Dr. Mister.
All right. To cliff notes our time here, in order to accomplish your goals, you need to keep them interesting and engaging, mitigate derailers, and develop the 6 components of doing that, which are
the individualized approach.
Yes.
Aligning your human internal operating system. Triggering your passion stimuli points. 4 is owning your personal responsibility, which we should be doing for everything.
Everything. It makes life better. It really
Yeah.
does.
Number 5, ensuring there's effective accountability that motivates you, moves you forward. And then mitigating the derailers.
Dr. Mister.
Dr. Mister. Yeah.
And so now's the time in our show for the book segment.
Yeah. Here is a great book, The Art of Impossible. I lost my sleeve, so look a little different. Lost my sleeve, and here are my notes. I lost my sleeve from it, so it'll look a little bit different if you look for it online, but it's The Art of the Impossible by Stephen Kotler. This dissects goal setting. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of goal setting and motivation and all of the aspects of it, great read. You don't have to go there. You can just look at our 6 components, but if you really want to dive, it brings in science, all sorts of good stuff. So I highly recommend this book if you're looking at goal setting.
So what I am taking away from today's show on the 6 keys to accomplishing goals are a lot of fun things to remember. Passion, engagement, ELF, easy, lucrative, easy,
Oh, you're right.
lucrative, fun, and Dr. Mister. And also I really appreciate the time that you took to bring forward the book to help us learn more with the Art of Impossible, and really shows how dedicated you are to bringing forward new ideas to everyone to help make work better. And also, Michelle, the removing friction piece really resonated with me again. And also, I think I might pair that with some Dr. Mister. I think I might.
Yes. And I just love Michelle. She's a wealth of insight, wealth of information. I love the science she brings. And just a thank you to John. This wouldn't be possible without John. Milwaukee Video, Studio 5, Studio A5.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This has been a blessing. I love our relationship. I love the community and family that we've started here, and just very appreciative of it.
So join us next time for brilliant business insights, getting you where you want to go, feeling the way you want to feel by removing the BS, the business stress.